to On. Today I'm with Chris Crace. How you doing, Chris?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. This is a wonderful day. So here in Tampa, we're both local guys. Last couple episodes, actually probably about the last 25 have been outside of Tampa. So it's nice to find out all about their weather and stuff. But with you, I'm just like, man, it's hot. It's just hot outside.
That's right.
How's everything going with you?
Good. Things are great. Can't complain. Just finished up my MBA and happy to have my weekends back free again to
Okay,
spend some
that's
more
awesome.
time coaching my kids and
Yeah.
getting ready for the summertime. So things are good.
Well, good. Congratulations. A huge accomplishment. That's awesome.
Thank
And I
you.
think the
Yeah,
best part of the accomplishment is what you said. You get to spend time with your kids, which is always a positive thing.
that's right.
I'm going to say one thing, and then we're going to start right into the show. You ever see the clip or the trailer for the movie Taken? I mean, can you remember it? It's years
Oh
ago
yeah,
now.
I remember.
She's under the bed,
Right,
and he
right.
and Liam Neeson's on the phone. Well, I got to tell you, when I first watched that clip, it was on mute, so I didn't know the premise behind the movie. But I'm going to tell you, that's what I look like when I'm trying to take a nap. Because if I'm not underneath my bed, my kids are all over me. I can never take a nap. So I want to let you know. So
Gotta hide.
spending more time with them, although nice, I got to be under the bed, brother.
Right.
Anyhow. So good. So let's get into a little bit of your military career, so we can kind of get a background of who you are, who Chris Crace is prior to now, and when you entered the military, where are you from, and go from there.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm from a small town by the name of Addison, Ohio. It's in Appalachia along the Ohio River Valley. Um, but there's mainly farmland and power plants down along the river. It's where we grew up. It's a really small school. I was one of 83 in my graduating class. Um, Upon graduation, I went to Ohio State and got a bachelor's in criminology. Following my immediately on getting my degree, I went accepted a commission as a second lieutenant in the Marine Corps. Spent time as an artillery officer. Served from '99 to '06. Was stationed at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, Quantico, Virginia, and I did a combat tour into Iraq in 2003 as part of the initial march up to Baghdad.
Outstanding. So while you were in the Marine Corps, what are some of the leadership positions that you had held while serving?
I was all over the place. So as I'm sure you know, and a lot of the viewers know, in the military, you constantly are moving from billet to billet. So I started off as a forward observer, um, quickly moved into fire direction officers, where I spent the bulk of my time as a lieutenant. Then went to executive officer for the firing battery. When I deployed to Iraq, I was actually a liaison officer, planning fires for Infantry Battalion 26. And then after that, came back and was on a B billet as an instructor at the basic school for newly commissioned lieutenants.
Okay,
And
outstanding.
while there, I was the platoon commander, executive officer, and all those things from a training command standpoint.
All from a little town in Ohio. That's awesome. So you serve in your time, and you're getting ready to make a decision to either stay or go. What was it like, that part before you actually started the process to transition? What was that like for you when what was the factors that you used to balance that? Do I stay or go?
Yeah, for me, it was easy. The only factor that made me decide it was time to get out was the birth of my son. So the plan was to stay in for 20 plus years. I was built for being a Marine.
Mm,
Loved everything about it. The only thing that wasn't there for me was the ability to be away from my son after seeing him be born. So just was I tell people that I was instantly vulnerable. Whereas before I felt like I could, you know, run through a brick wall. Um, wasn't worried about anything. Just doing the mission, completing the mission, and moving on to the next. After he was born, um, just wasn't afraid of getting killed in combat and not being there. But it was really just we were looking at 14-month deployments back then, and
yeah.
I have the utmost respect for military members that can stay in and do their 20 plus and retire. I just wasn't willing to make that sacrifice, and having my son changed me as a person. So for me, it was an easy choice.
Yeah.
The challenge, though, I think was even greater because I wasn't necessarily prepared to make that transition, and had to do it within about a 6-month period of making up my mind that was the move.
Right, right. So, I mean, and that's it. So the 6 month time period to make up the mind to do the stuff, right? That's where that part gets difficult. So, walk me through your transition process. I mean, obviously, there's all these programs that have been, I mean, I know the Marines are different than the Army, and the Air Force is different than the Navy. The programs are all different, but they're all based on pretty much the same stuff, right? So, talk to me about that, the transition process itself for you. Did they prepare you? Were you prepared when you actually walked out to become a civilian guy?
Yeah, absolutely. I had no problems. No, I'm kidding, obviously. Uh, so I got out in 2006 and was from a B billet at that. So I wasn't coming out of Fleet Marine Force, was off a B billet. So the transition through TAPS was basically a checklist. So I'm from back in the day when you were given a out processing checklist, and you went to supply, you went and turned in your gear, you turned in your weapon. About midway down was TAPS that you had to go set through TAPS. But if you didn't really have time to do it and didn't want to spend the 6 hours class, then they could rubber stamp it. And so I rubber stamped and
Yeah.
and moved on. So this was prior to LinkedIn.
Right.
Even in the Marine Corps, we were just starting to use email. So
Right. Right.
it was definitely a different time. And it was still very much on, doing some internet research, finding out companies, kind of cold calling and setting in applications and pushing yourself out there on the job boards and hoping that something would come forward. So
Yeah.
that's what I was doing.
Yeah.
Um,
And you landed you sent out one resume to one company who hired you, and then you've lived happily ever after since then.
that's right. No, a little more challenging than that. So, um, yeah, there was, remember this was 6 months. So,
Right.
this was my full-time job, like for 6 months as I was getting ready to go. I mean, I spent every minute, from morning until night, trying to network via phone calls and people that I knew that were also getting out and sharing information with them, trying to network from that standpoint. I was able to get connected with one of the junior military officer headhunting companies. So I got the opportunity to kind of quickly speed up my interview skills and capabilities because I went through kind of the gauntlet that you do when you go through a lot of those, where you sit
Right.
down and you're in front of 10 different companies within 8 hours,
Yeah.
back-to-back interviews. And so while there was a few that piqued my interest that I wanted to go for, I think the biggest thing that I gained from that was kind of the crash course in interviewing capabilities and getting comfortable with my pitch, my story. And then it also gave me an opportunity through being exposed to a lot of different companies to kind of figure out what I wanted to do and where I wanted to focus my efforts.
Right.
But they didn't bear fruit. Nobody wanted to pick me up as an artillery officer with a criminology degree,
Right. Right.
and that didn't want to go into law enforcement at that time.
Mhm.
So yeah, there was some challenges to that.
Right. Right. So that the process is, it seems so easy. I mean, and I think that us as veterans, and I think we have this idea, right? And I don't want to say entitled, because that seems kind of like a negative connotation. That's a horrible word, right? But I believe that we're told these things that the civilian world wants us. So all we have, if we have a degree in this, it doesn't really matter as long as you have a degree. It doesn't have to matter what the job is, or don't worry about a degree. They're going to hire you anyway because they appreciate your service, right? And that goes only so far, right?
Hmm. That's right.
So
Well, and it depends on the industry too, and it depends on kind of where you're going after. I think one of the things that I share with transitioning veterans and service members that are looking to get into the workforce is, each industry is different. And so really learn that industry and understand, what's important, right? If you're trying to break into IT, you should probably have a bit of an IT background or a little bit of certifications or
right.
something along those lines.
Mhm.
If you're trying to break into sales positions, then you're going to have a little bit more flexibility. So, it's a mix of, yes, there are a lot of companies that are doing a lot of great works wanting to put veterans to work, but there's only so much that they can do within certain industries, and so you got to be knowledgeable of that. And it's a mix of what you want to do, what your experience lends itself to, and then
Mhm.
being able to kind of match those two together with the right employer.
Right, right. It's awesome. So after you started negotiating the obstacle course, right, upon transition about this job or that job, resumes and interviews and all that stuff, where did you first? Who gave you your first opportunity upon exiting? What was that like?
Um, yeah, it was wonderful, and then the way that it came about was through that networking that I talked about earlier. There was a master gunny that was getting out the same time that I was, and we were, he and I were sharing a lot of notes, and had a lot of similar interests as far as what we wanted to go into. We were both looking to get into project management. So we shared a lot of notes. He ended up knowing a point of contact at a staffing firm that's here in Tampa. The chief services officer for that company just happens to be a retired Marine officer
Mhm.
who also was at the basic school, and so he had a pretty particular model for what he was looking to bring in. So he was looking for a JMO type that was coming out from the basic school because of um, the presentations and the ability to stand up in front of large audiences and put together and communicate effectively, and the leadership that you're constantly training folks on. So he was looking for some of those things.
Mhm.
And I was a perfect fit for what he happened to be looking at. So it was a bit of a perfect storm, right? If I hadn't have
Right,
talked to that Master Gunny, he wouldn't have known him. I wouldn't have necessarily been coming from the basic school.
right.
Might not have worked out, but it did.
Mhm.
And it was awesome because I came into their PMO office and was able to, with the support of him having made that transition many years before and understanding and not being the first of my type from the basic school with fitting that model.
Mhm.
He knew what I needed, and the support was there as well. So it really turned out to be an excellent opportunity for me.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. So now, what is it that you do now? And this is over time, right? So when you got that job and where that first started, that was back in what, 07, 08 time frame?
Yeah, towards the end of '06, right?
Okay, end of '06, and now here we are. Fast forward 12 years, and I'm sure a lot of things have happened since then, where you've been able to progress throughout different jobs or even the same place. How's that been?
Yeah, so within the first company, I worked there 9 years.
Mm,
So obviously, I felt the payback was there, the support was there,
mm,
the firm's mission and the values matched up very nicely with my own. So I ended up staying there for 9 years, and I had opportunities to go to other companies along the way and offers, but I turned them down just because I felt you know not obligated, but I felt a very strong connection to
mm.
that company for giving me the breaks
Yeah.
and believing in me. So, yeah, I progressed through. I was able to hit the spotlight a little bit because we got into some mergers and acquisitions, and I was able to be one of the program managers on that. And then we also went through a divestiture of one of our divisions a couple years after, so I got to lead the program for that divestiture, which gave me a lot of contacts and connections across the firm. Obviously, whenever you're talking M&A, you're touching all parts of the business.
Right.
So I was able to move over into the staffing side and led various recruiting and staffing teams and talent acquisition strategies for the firm, and continued to advance there up to the senior director level, prior to the dream job that I'm currently in right now, opening up at PricewaterhouseCoopers, where I came over as the veteran advocacy leader for the U.S. firm here at PwC.
That's awesome. So being that is that just local into Tampa area, or is that nationwide and through PwC?
Yeah, so it's all across the U.S. firm. So PwC is global. So it's all across the U.S. is my area of focus.
It's
It's focused
outstanding.
on talent acquisition strategies for bringing in veteran service members and military spouses. But it also goes deeper, being that I work in the Diversity and Inclusion Center of Excellence.
Yeah.
And so we focus on the total experience, total employee experience from talent acquisition through onboarding, mentoring, various retention efforts. And then I also get to work with our employee resource group, which we refer to as the VAN, the Veterans
Mhm.
Affinity Network, and work hand in hand with the leaders across the firm that support the veterans once they're in the firm with us as well.
That's awesome. So one of the things that I've heard throughout over the past year, just having these conversations, is not so much the difficulties in hiring veterans, but the difficulties in retaining veterans. And a lot of folks are more, I'd say, more recently, from what I gather. I mean, I haven't been doing this for years, so I have no real context. But what I gather is that over the past 6 months to 8 months, a lot of these companies are actually spending a little bit more time and focus on the retention of the veterans as opposed to the hiring of, because they're getting hired. It's just a matter of, can you keep them?
Yeah, that's definitely where the conversation and the trend has swung. So a couple years ago, it was just let's bring in veterans because there was, the need was there, the facts and the figures were out that veteran employment was up, and with a lot of the national efforts that took place, a lot of companies got behind the work, and now you're right, it's starting to now evolve into more retention and mentoring and supporting those veterans through not only through onboarding but also through especially through their first 2 years,
Right.
because we know, I think it's about 17 months, or
Mhm.
within the first 7 months, a lot of veterans are going to leave
Yep.
and move on to something else. And if they don't have any um, insight into their career advancement at about the year and a half mark, they're getting antsy again. So
Yeah.
it's critical, especially through that first 2 year mark, to stay with them and stay engaged.
Oh, that's awesome. I mean, it's significant in the sense. I think that we have this thing about us. One, we're used to PCSing. We're used to people telling us to go, and if I'm not doing so much to progress, then what am I doing? And it's time to go jump ship and do something else. And I mean, we're trainable. We're able to be to get things, but we got that loyalty, the obligation feeling. But then at the same time, it's all right. I got to get out of here. This isn't what I'm trying to do. But I've noticed that through conversation, again, like I said about the retention part, understanding that there is a need, right? And that these folks that are coming in, no matter what they do, they are bringing a good quality to the workforce. But in order to keep them, I don't know, focused, if you will, and you have to kind of speak to them a little bit different. You have to bring out, hey, listen, here's the ladder. You want to be in a ladder because we're always progressive, right? So it's a matter of, I guess, being transparent in a sense. That's obviously not the only issue or only thing to look at, but I think there's that focus, that drivenness that they have. I don't even think
Yeah,
that's a
no, but yeah, but you're definitely hitting on the key point. It's that a lot of companies don't necessarily have a progression track that's laid out in front of you, and a lot of them you have to move, kind of horizontally. You're not just going to go straight up in a vertical path. So being able to
right.
kind of lay out a roadmap, if you will, for
Mm.
being able to attain your career goals is important. And a lot of companies don't do that, right? And a lot of companies, even when you ask for it, can't provide you one. It's a different environment from what we come from in the military, with understanding exactly what we need to progress to that next level and meet that next rate and that next grade.
Mm.
So it's a challenge because a lot of companies aren't prepared to do it.
Okay.
And you're right, veterans need to see at least a plan, and need to have that conversation for sure to understand where they're going.
For sure. So one of the things, so as Four Block came down to Florida, and that's how I met you, is at Four Block, and as we were trying to, put these folks through transition and veterans, understanding the process itself, and kind of getting a feel for corporate America. I was introduced to you, and you gave you spoke to the class, and this is the part that intrigued me so much and wanted you to come on the show. We could talk leadership all day long, but really, you ever play Super Mario Brothers back in the day?
Oh yeah.
So he gets underneath the coin, he's jumping, and it's hitting the coin, going ding, ding, ding. Well, every time you spoke, you were like the coin, and if it was just words of wisdom, knowledge is being dropped, and so much of it in such a short period. I was wanting more, and I'm the instructor. I mean, I was like, wow, this guy's brilliant. But I say that because we talked about qualities, right? So you talked about some things about resumes. We talked about interviews. We talked about a whole bunch of stuff. But you had made mention about certain qualities, and we had talked about cultural fits. So I ask you, in one sense, what qualities or leadership qualities do you look for when veterans come out? What are those qualities that we have, and what are you looking for when they come into your office, right?
Mhm. Yeah, so my experience through conversations and my own, having led teams in the past, it's interesting because it goes back to what I learned the first day at Officer Candidate School with the 14 leadership traits. that Marines were taught. The
Mhm.
acronym's JJ did tie buckle. And that probably resonates with a lot of viewers. And those of you that haven't heard of it, definitely Google JJ did tie buckle. It gives you 14 leadership traits that if you are able to master, that you'd be on top of the world.
Mhm.
So I always go back to that, interestingly enough. And I think at the top of the list, obviously, this is at the top for most everybody, it's integrity, right? I think integrity enables you to have the moral authority to lead, govern, and then also hold employees accountable. If
Yeah.
you don't have that moral high ground, as we refer to it, everything else is a challenge. I think with integrity serves as the basis for, and the base, if you will, for all other attributes to be built upon. And if you don't have that, it's going to be a challenge.
Okay.
And you know, we in the military, it's kind of ingrained across all services, right? Integrity, you
Mhm.
have to take integrity, you got to stand up, do the right thing when nobody's looking. But I'll tell you, out in the civilian sector, so to speak, that's not preached, and definitely not the case across the board. So that's one thing
Right.
that employers are hungry for, that a lot of veterans are able to kind of do in second nature at this point in our careers.
Right. That's awesome.
I think the other initiative is another one that goes a long way. Having a bias for action, not waiting to be told what to do or how to do it. I think not only taking taking initiative for challenges that are in place, but also taking the initiative to avoid certain circumstances or challenges that may come down the road based on inaction. So kind of having that bias to take the initiative, step up, not being afraid to fail, basing it on good sound judgment and everything that comes along with it. But initiative is another big one. I think judgment, as I just kind of hit on too,
Mhm.
poor judgment and decisions can have a major impact to not only to your teams but also to your companies, your corporations. Having poor judgment based on your actions, I think it can lead to mistrust. And if you don't have trust, then you're not going to have much from a leadership standpoint whenever you're trying to lead people.
Right. Right.
The last two that I think too are courage and endurance.
Mhm.
I think courage is something that sets us apart a lot of times as service members and veterans in the workforce as well. Having that moral courage we refer to often, to be able to stand up for what's right, even if it's not going to be real popular.
Mhm.
The ability to hold not only yourself accountable, but to hold peers, colleagues, obviously your team members, and even sometimes your boss, to kind of tactfully hold them accountable,
Mhm.
and having the courage to step up and do that is a major differentiator. And then the last one that I'll say is endurance. And obviously being fit and having physical endurance are important to a healthy life professionally and at home.
Right.
But when I think of endurance, I think more to it of from the standpoint of mental stamina,
Mhm.
or emotional endurance,
Mhm.
the ability to kind of stay after it when times get challenging. When business is not great and you have to go the extra mile and hold people accountable to be there with you. And a lot of times that can last for a long time.
Right.
And having that mental endurance and stamina to stay focused and have your team members see that you're focused through that's going to carry them through that a long time, along the way with you as well.
That's
So
awesome.
those are a few that come to mind. And again, JJ did tie buckle. So everything I learned day one at OCS.
That's awesome. That's great. No, I appreciate it. So, if you had, I'm going to ask you to give me one piece of advice, but I'd like you to kind of just give me more than one, right? I'm going to ask for one, but it's hard for me to ask you for one piece of advice for a transitioning veteran, because I know you have so much information, and I could probably have you on the show for 4 hours, run it straight into iTunes and let just people listen to it, because there's so much knowledge there, right? But I'd like to ask you if you truly had one piece of advice to give a transitioning veteran as they're getting ready to go out there into the real world, we're assuming that they prepared, right, over a 12 to 24-month time period. What is it that you would offer them as some type of advice as they transition?
Yeah. Well, And we kind of assume that you talked about the preparedness level, but I think that's a broad assumption. And I think
Huge.
that preparation comes in a few different angles and a few different modes, if you will. I think understanding what kind of career you're looking to get into, or at least understanding the industry that you're interested in, is very important. And you have to have a plan to be able to deviate from.
Mhm.
The reason I say this is because one of my pet peeves that I hear all the time, every time I'm at a hiring event, this comes out several times, and I always give this piece of advice when it happens. The worst thing that you can say to a recruiter or a manager at a company is when they ask you, what do you want to do, and what's the answer we hear so many times? What do you have?
What do you
Right?
have? What's
Don't
there?
say that. Don't say what do you have. Come
Mhm.
up with, have your plan, have something that you're passionate about, whether or not you understand if it's going to be where you're going to go or not, but at least have a plan, and then that will enable them to say, all right, this guy or gal has put some thought into this, and I'm willing to give them a little bit of career advice or mentorship and open them to some things that they may not have considered. Um, and then you need to be open to that career advice and the opportunities that can come with it. But you're 9 times out of the 10, you're not going to turn somebody off by telling them that you want to go into cybersecurity.
Mhm.
If they have a position that's outside of that, they're not going to talk to you about it.
Right.
But if you come up and say, "What do you have?" I'm going to give you, the typical recruiter spiel. This is what we are. We're vast. Go check out our website, right? And that's what's
Right.
going to happen.
Yeah.
So don't say what do you have available. Have a plan to deviate from.
I'll do anything,
That's right.
anything.
That's right.
It,
And many
it,
times it's true, right?
mhm.
And because we don't know, we are just looking to break in
Yeah.
and learn about industries or companies, and then see if it's a good fit and adapt, as we
Mhm.
all are adaptable and feel that we can thrive in any type of environment. And many times that's true,
Mhm.
but employers don't want to hear that the first time you talk to you.
Of course not, and I think that's really interesting. I remember about a year before I retired, one of my mentors. I mean, I have several, right? Not only just through my career and while I was in, but after they left, they still mentored me as I was transitioning. And I still talk to the majority of them today. But one of the guys, he's funny, big old guy, and he said the craziest question came to me, and it actually happened when he called me. He was like, someone when I went for to talk to this hiring manager, they asked me, "What can you do?" And it was funny because I never heard no throughout my whole time, 27 years in the army, no one ever asked me what I can do. So I told her, hey, what do you want me to do? I mean, I can do anything. And he said that wasn't the right answer. He knew that wasn't the right answer, but because he wasn't prepared for that question, because as you know, whether you serve 2 years, 8 years, 25 years, no one ever asks you in any branch of service, what can you do? There's an expectation that you're going to do whatever that
Right.
billet is, no matter what your skill level is. It's just what you're going to do. So you adapt and overcome. So when that question was asked to him, he was truly just baffled. And it was funny because, well, to know the man and to hear his response, I could imagine him saying that to her in the manner in which he did, with sincere, genuine, like, hey, what do you want me to do? I'm ready. So
Right.
obviously, with that being said, he fixed himself and went along and kind of learned the little, do the pitch. What am I? What was I doing? Where am I at? What do I want to do? And that was significant. And that was, I mean, that's a huge piece of advice, especially for folks, as I know that I get text messages, emails from that say, hey, I had this, I think I bombed. I talked to this hiring manager. I don't, obviously you had mentioned LinkedIn earlier. So that's a huge reason why so many folks are now talking directly to hiring managers, vice the normal route, which I know that still exists, but I'm talking to this hiring manager and they asked me a question and I totally screwed it up and I don't think I can recover. And, obviously there's the ability to recover as long as you don't say random ignorant things because they told you that you were,
Right.
what you were. But anyway,
Just
that's
like
really
just like
interesting.
anything else in life, you got to have a plan. Know that plan's most likely going to fall apart, but it gives you a pivot point and a place to be able to kind of operate from.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like you said, that pitch, or that elevator pitch, or the spiel about who you
Mm-hmm.
are, what you're interested in, is basically kind of the line that you throw out to get folks interested enough to want to listen to you and talk to you further.
Yeah.
And so, just have a plan for that.
So I'm interested, right? I'm interested in the fact that you said you just finished your MBA, right? And we're talking at the end of '06, you started working. You were with the company for 9 years. You're in a great position. You got a dream job, yet you're still continuing your education. And I'm saying that because I want you to hit on something specific for me that I try to drill into people's heads when they ask me these questions. So you're just finished your master's. I got people saying, "Hey, listen, I met every requirement possible. I didn't have a degree, and it said required a bachelor's degree. So I figured if I had 9 out of the 10 requirements, just not the degree, that I'd actually get a foot in the door." What can you tell me about requirements versus preferences? Is that a significant thing?
Yeah, and it's very specific. Again, it's industry, but more so even at the company level.
Mm,
We're seeing more and more companies now that are putting phrases in their job postings, such as "or military experience,"
mm,
or equivalent military experience. So when you see that on a job posting, you're golden, right? I mean,
yeah.
that means that they've cared enough to adjust their requirements,
Mm,
their job requirements. They're open to it. They likely have a program in place, so they wouldn't be putting that in there in the first place.
right.
So those are that's definitely a good sign when you see that. It's challenging, right? Because you have to have, as you go into a company, they're not hiring for just great people to come in. They're
Mm,
hiring to fill a position, right? I mean, and there are certain programs that you get into with different companies that will have a leadership development program that will kind of give you a crash course and take you through what you need, right?
mm,
But the majority of the positions that you're going to apply for fall outside of that, and that position is probably not a brand new position. It was
right.
probably filled before with somebody, and now there's a need to bring somebody in to fill that. And there's an
Mm,
expectation that you need to at least have some basis to be able to operate from, to come in and make an impact. Um, and so the certifications are definitely something that you need to be cognizant of and take a
right.
look at and pursue. And there's so many different things with the post 9/11 GI Bill and different free offerings and certifications that companies are that corporate veteran support organizations are offering now, that you can absolutely get those certs without paying out of your own pocket. And they're making it now so that where you can do it on your free time, if
Mm.
if we ever had any free time,
Right, right, right.
to be
I'm
able
looking
to
for
pick
where the
up
free
on.
time's at, man.
Yeah, but a lot of times your hands are tied, and you talked about the process, right? And the majority of the process is that you're going to have a recruiter that's going to be looking at this job posting, and they're going to be trying to match candidates against that. And so many times these positions are going to be, extremely competitive, and you're going to have hundreds, if not thousands, of applicants that are coming against these, right?
Yeah.
And the first thing recruiters are going to do is they're going to go through. There's either a tool to do it for them, or they're going to do it, and they're going to screen for, do you meet the specific requirements and certifications and education that they're looking for? And a lot of times,
Mhm.
if you don't, they don't even look at your resume any further.
Yeah.
So you need to be wise about how you approach that, and be knowledgeable about the space and the industry that you're going after, and whether or not your experience in the military can count towards those or not. And many times too, we have to humble ourselves. And although we could move into a director position,
Mm.
or even a manager position in companies, a lot of times you have to humble yourself and go through and get that entry level position with the expectation that your abilities are going to make you shine and stand out and get promoted faster than others, just by kind of doing what you do normally.
Right. And I think that's very wise. And I'm just through conversations that I've had over the past year with some folks, and that hard headed pride that we have, I'm not entry level person. I need to start here. And a lot of folks don't realize that. How is it that your experience? Not saying that your experience should be marginalized, but if that guy that's in the company has been with that company for 12 years, your 20 years, although nice, isn't within that company. So the culture of that company, the knowledge of that company, all the things that come inherent with being involved with that company, you're not competitive, I guess, in that sense, because they're already there. It's just a matter of kind of getting a little bright, and maybe swallowing a little bit of that pride and being humble, like you said, and just getting your foot in the door, because you can shine and you can do those things that are doing well,
Right.
to make you do well.
Well, and a lot
Now,
of times you have to take, what I always tell people is don't take a job, right? You definitely want to take a position that's going to lead to a career.
Yeah.
So while you may not fall into your career, don't simply just take a job.
Right.
Take a job that's going to be a plan towards your ultimate career path. And it can be, vastly diverse from where you start on that to the steps that you're going to take to be able to move into that career path. But just make sure that there's a plan behind every position that you're taking, accepting, or moving over into.
Right, right. And I'm amazed sometimes how many conversations I have. And I'm going to go back to the educational portion, the task portion of like things as people are leaving. I'm kind of going back way far, but what I wanted to bring up in particular was education. I mean, again, that kind of goes back to when I said your continuing education, just getting your master's degree. So many young soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, as their time's up. Not the retirees who have a benefit a little bit. They have a pension. They got the retirement, which is great. I mean, it's very helpful to help you have some space. It's not an overabundance of money, but it's money nonetheless, right? Where some of these guys that are separating after 5, 6, 8 years, they don't have it, right? They don't have that income anymore. And the one thing that I'm amazed by through conversation is how many people don't understand the GI Bill, don't understand that they can use that to get an education. A lot of young enlisted folks and old ones alike. I wouldn't have joined the military if I wanted to go to college. That's the mantra, right? That everybody says. But what they do is they go to the mandated TAPS program or whatever that program is for 5 days, and then did I fall out somehow? Look at that.
You're back.
I fell out and came back in. It was just a pause. But as I see these guys, they don't want to be in the class, so they go through the class as fast as possible. They don't listen to anybody talking about education because all they want to do is not be yelled at anymore. They don't want to be in the military. They're that frustrated with it. And then while they're sitting out there not wanting to take that minimum wage job because they believe they're entitled to the higher paying jobs, although they don't have an education approved to put themselves in that area, then they get frustrated and they talk bad about the military and how they left them high and dry. But more importantly, they end up doing silly things, right? So I believe that we have to educate our folks when they're in, as opposed to worrying about the transition process after the fact, right? Because that's the frustration, is that I see them coming out to you guys trying to get jobs, yet they just aren't really prepared. And I wish that there'd be a little bit better preparation prior to departure. 6 months, although nice, it's not good for transition.
Yeah. Well, and with the education benefits that are provided now as you transition out, there's no reason not to take that. You're getting money while you're going to school in many cases.
Yeah.
And it also is a great time to decompress and kind of work on your transition period from military into the civilian sector as well. So it gives you a little bit of a buffer, if you will, between leaving the military, walking straight into a job by going to a college campus, you even getting a part-time job while you're on college, taking full-time college credits, gives you that ability to kind of decompress a little bit, to learn a little bit more of the interaction, because many of us are coming back straight from deployment, right? And now we're transitioning out, and you need a little bit of that time to reacclimate.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to tell you, I had a conversation with someone yesterday, and they said, "How is it that you consider yourself a transition specialist?" Right? And I was amazed, first of all, because I don't think I've ever once in the existence of life said I'm a transition specialist. So I was kind of taken aback.
Is that a thing? That's cool.
Yeah, I was like, if that's a thing, let me apply somewhere, please.
I'm going to add that to my LinkedIn profile.
It's coming up, right? And it was baffling to me because I told the person that said it, I said, listen, a lot of people read books about business and become good business people by reading what other people do. A lot of people, do a lot of things by watching documentaries and things. I said, I speak to people every day that have transitioned and share their stories with me. And that's what this is about. I said, I'm not a specialist. I'm learning. That's why I actually do this. So I can also give some information to transition and veterans, but I want to learn the process. I'm still in transition. I don't know if the transition process really ever ends, but I mean, I'm trying to figure it out as I go along too. So it just baffled me that they had said that to me, because I was like, well, I haven't wrote a book, The Transition Specialist, yet, but maybe that's coming to theaters near you, right? I don't know.
Well, I can tell you, I've been out since 2006, and I just used the word SOP in a business meeting the other day, and nobody knew what the heck I was talking about. So.
It works, right? So what I'm going to ask you to do as we wrap up, I want to ask you do you have anything else that you would like to share with any of the people listening or are going to be listening here shortly?
No, I think we've been able to hit on most of the key points.
Okay.
Like you said, I'd be happy to come back and dig into some different topics, but
Yeah, good.
I think we've hit most of everything today.
Outstanding. So if anybody wanted to reach out to you, what could they, if they said, hey, this guy actually sounded like he knew what he was talking about, the first guest that he ever had that knows what he was talking about, which I'm just kidding, but if they wanted to reach out to Chris Crace, how could they link up with you?
LinkedIn. So I monitor my LinkedIn account
Okay.
very actively. So just send me. There's not many Chris Craces in the world, so it should be a quick search. Currently working at PwC and Marine Corps veterans. So if you do a little bit of that search into LinkedIn, you'll find me. Just send me an in message or a connect request, and be happy to support any way I can.
Outstanding. So, are you doing anything outside of working in the lending a helping hand here at veteran programs or any civilian programs? Do you do anything that just volunteer stuff? Do you do anything in the community at all?
Yeah, so 4 Block, obviously, where we met, something I've done for the last couple of years. Started doing a branding class and engaging with the 4 Block students in Atlanta a couple of years ago, and now we've just opened a new class here in Tampa. Just finished our first class there and getting ready to start another one in September.
Yeah.
So I work closely with 4 Block. Also, I'm a gray shirt volunteer with Team Rubicon, which is a great veteran first responder organization. I would encourage people to take a look at Team Rubicon. They do some great works. I've been out on disaster relief efforts with them, saw firsthand. There's absolutely no waste. They're absolutely mission oriented. And the camaraderie that you get amongst the other veterans is second to none, unlike anything that you could get other than being in the military. The level of caring, support, um, you know, and friendships that you get from that, and bonds that you get when you're out working in those types of environments are
Right.
are very impactful.
That's awesome.
And I do a lot with kids from coaching. So
Yeah, yeah, good deal. Well, that's what I like to do too. I try to do that as much as I can, but my time is not free. So when I'm not doing this with people here or working over there or going to 4 Block and doing that stuff, I actually try to spend as much time with my kids as possible to make sure that they grow up to be healthy young, men and women and contributing members to society. Because that's, I guess, we're obligated as fathers and parents to raise our children. So that's what I'm trying to do too. So it's
yeah.
good stuff. All right, so I'm going to ask you for one. So on this show, what we do is you can't make this stuff up story, and I'd like to hear, and it doesn't have to be while you're in the military. I'd prefer it, but I don't care. But something that has to do with the military time, and it could be funny, it could be just I can't believe it really happened, whatever the case may be. But if you can recall a story that was just awesome that you can't make up, I'd love to hear it.
So this was interesting because I definitely have that story, but it's funny that I'd forgotten it. I think, as veterans, especially in 2003 with the anthrax and all the things they stuck us with, my
Right.
memory has some definite gaps in it. But as I thought about that, I was in Iraq 2003. It's like day 5 of the march up to Baghdad combat operations. So stress is at an all-time high. And we're on heightened alert the entire time. We're out in the middle of the desert, and so I'm the watch officer as the sun's coming up one morning, and I hear a lot of commotion as the Marines are kind of starting to rustle around, and the gunny and I run outside to see what's going on, and we find a cow that has infiltrated our position. And we had the razor wire laid out, the whole thing. I mean,
Yeah.
fields of fire, everything interlocking, with positions all over. So we were loaded for bear and ready to go. And this
Yeah.
cow made its way through the lines. So the funnier thing is that nobody knew what to do. So he
Right.
came out, and they're all just looking at it like, "What do we do?" And we heard a couple of the sergeants say, "Go pick the cow out and get rid of it. It needs to get outside before it poops
Yeah. Yeah.
inside the
Right. Right.
line."
Yeah. Yeah.
And nobody would go touch it. Nobody knew what to do. I guess I was surrounded by a bunch of city boy Marines. So
City boys. That's it.
being that I grew up on out in the country and was used to horses and cows and
Yeah.
whatnot, I grabbed some 550 cord and fashioned a lasso. Walked up calmly put it around the cow's neck and walked him outside the line. And so, everybody was just amazed that the cow would follow you with 550 cord around its neck.
Right,
So,
right,
um, but it was, the gunny was definitely not amused. I found it to be quite hilarious.
right.
I think the gunny had the Marines that were on watch come up with a new SOP for what to do if cattle infiltrate the lines, and full blown SOP, made them write it up and brief it to the next watch.
That's awesome.
But I got the coolest nickname ever out of it. So they started, or the call sign actually, they started calling me Cowboy. So that's
Oh
pretty
boy.
cool.
Hey, it makes sense. I mean, actually makes sense. I was thinking of what I was going to call you after it was done. I was like, man, that's pretty interesting. But that I can't beat it. So Cowboy is it. I mean, I was thinking about 7 or 8 names and they all sucked, but Cowboy was it. Well, good deal. Well, I'll tell you what, Chris, I appreciate you coming on. I really appreciate you taking your time. I mean, to share it with me and the viewers and listeners. And I'm thankful for you. So thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, my pleasure. And good luck with you and everything that you're doing along your transition.
I appreciate it, and we'll definitely get you back in. We'll do some question and answer. We'll bring some folks on, and it'll be great. We'll let some folks fire some questions at you, and we'll go from there.
All right.
Outstanding. Well, thank you all for coming and watching, and for all you that listen. We'll see you next time on the other side.